Hello friends, I'm Kanchan from Akulmach Technologies and you are welcome to our show. Today we have a very interesting personality and she is Professor Amita Sinha. She is a former professor of landscape and architecture and South Asian studies, University of Illinois, USA. Has also taught in the Department of Architecture, Regional Planning, IIT Kharagpur, and also in the Humanities and Social Science Department of IIT Gandhinagar. She is the author of Landscape in India, the famous Forms and Meaning. She is also a senior Fulbright researcher at Indian National Trust of Art and Cultural Heritage, New Delhi. She is also a recipient of Fulbright Nehru Academic and Professional Excellence Award Fellowship in 2018 and 19. So without wasting any time further, I would like to welcome Professor Amita Sinha in our show. Welcome to the show, ma'am. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm very well.
You know that we had been discussing about mandala architecture, and we last episode we have done on Varanasi and the city formation using few aspects of mandala. Now today I got interested to really know about the ghats of Varanasi. Now ghats in Varanasi are a riverfront step leading to the bank of river Ganga. The city has 88 ghats, and most of the ghats are bathing and puja ceremony ghats, while two ghats are used exclusively as cremation site. So, Professor Sinha, so today we are discussing about ghats. So, what do you really think before you really, when anybody mentioned Varanasi ghats, what are the visualization you really come to know?
I visualize the temple spires. I see the Ganga, and I see people on boats coming down from the steps into the Ganga, taking a bath, offering their prayers.
Yes, actually, whenever we talk about Varanasi and its Ghat, so many Indians, especially who wish to go to Varanasi and they want to do a holy dip in the river. So I would like to ask you, the Ghats of Varanasi are very, very famous. So what is their function?
Yes. Well, as you can see in this image, they stretch for 6.8 kilometers, and temple spires, sandstone palace buildings, boats. So they stretch on and on. So these are the most magnificent and longest stretch of ghats in the Indian subcontinent. The function of the ghats, as you know, is to take people down to the river. And
Okay.
the river does not have the same level. As you know, during the monsoon season, the river really rises up. And during the dry season, the river the level falls down. So in Varanasi, as the Ganga takes its northern turn, uh, we have a topography here, a high ridge on which these palaces and temples are located. And to get down from that high ridge into the water, the ghats, which probably were just a kacha embankment 700 or 800 years ago, then began to be clad in stone, and slowly, the ghats evolved. And yes, as you said, there are about 88 ghats. Many of the ghats um, are very old, and some of them have been divided and subdivided. Now, I want to also draw your attention to how the Ganga floods during the monsoon season. So, at the lowest level, uh, uh, one can go down to the lowest step of the ghat and access the Ganga. As the Ganga rises, activities shift to a higher level, and during the 100-year flood, actually, Ganga submerges not only the entire stretch of ghats but also part of the city itself. So, if the Ghats had not been there, I think access to Ganga would have been very difficult. And the way the levels of the Ghats work is with the different levels of Ganga rising and falling. And here in these photographs taken of Assi Ghat, we can see how the river during the monsoon season has completely covered this landing, and during the winter season, it has receded. And here in this image of the riverside palace, the red line indicates how high the Ganga goes up. And these palaces are built like almost like fortifications because there are fewer openings. Otherwise, during the monsoon season, the water would enter. Now, the Ghats are on the western edge, and so one can pray to Surya as the sun rises. And in fact, a lot of devotees get up very early in the morning from the old city before 4 o'clock, 4 a.m., and they find themselves on
Mm.
the Ghats as the
Mm.
sun rises, and they do
Right.
Surya Namaskar.
Mm.
And of course, then bathing any time of the day, but
Mm.
especially in the mornings, because Ganga is the ultimate symbol of purity. And as one bathes, one is not only becoming physically pure, but is also shedding moral sins and is becoming ritually uh, pure.
Right.
And the Ghat, especially the Dashashmedh Ghat, is also the place where a large scale arti takes place. So in the evenings in the Ashwamedh Ghat, um, uh, uh, arti is done, and hundreds of people watch it.
Mm.
Um, this photograph shows, and it's an aerial view. It shows all the different things that will happen during the day. For example, these wooden platforms
Mm.
are then occupied by ghatiyas or the pandas who do pinddan for ancestors.
Mhm.
Then there is other kinds of puja going on, uh, buying and selling of puja items,
Mm.
um, massaging,
Right.
and shaving off the head, and so on and so forth. So the ghats are very lively,
Mhm.
and this shows how during the day at Asighat,
Mm.
the rhythm changes. So in the morning, you have Subah Banaras, and there are vocal concerts and there are yoga sessions. Of course, the Aarti also at dawn. And during the day, the activities pick up because many tourists live near Asighat. So, this is also a place where tourist items are sold. There are restaurants and bookshops.
Mm.
Again, in the afternoon, it becomes a little, the rhythm becomes a little quieter. People can be found sleeping on the ghats.
Right.
Students from PHU
Mhm.
come and hang out, and then in the evening time, aarti.
Right. So, actually, it was so interesting when you're going through all these slides, and whenever I think of Varanasi or its ghats, I always feel that yes, maybe tomorrow or maybe after a week, I will be visiting Varanasi, which is just a stone throw away from here, where I live. But most Varanasi ghats were built in 18th century when the city came under Maratha rule. The patrons of current ghats are Marathas, Sindhyas, Holkar, Bhosles, Peshwas, and many ghats are associated with legend and mythology, as you know. While many ghats are privately owned, also, that is so wonderful. And morning boat ride on Ganga across the Ghat is popular visitors attraction, and I know that many people do visit for this attraction quite many times. Now, what are the most popular Ghat, and what is their significance?
Well, if we can think of the Ganga Riverfront at Varanasi uh, in the form of a Vastu Purush Mandal, so here we have the spirit of the site, Purusha,
Mm.
And think of his spine
Right.
as the Ganga rising through the
Right.
spine as the
Mm-hmm.
Kundalini, and these would be the chakras through which it rises.
Mm-hmm.
And these five teeth are the five chakras, and they are really the most popular ghats, starting with Assi Ghat in the southern direction, then the Ashwamedh, Manikarnika, Panchganga, and Adikeshav Ghat. And here in this collage, uh, each ghat has been associated with the essential constituent of all matter,
Mm-hmm.
the Panch Mahabhut.
Mm-hmm.
So wind is associated with Asighat, ether with the Shashwamedh, fire with Manikarnika. Manikarnika is always burning, water with Panchganga, where
Oh,
five forms of the Ganga converge,
oh, great.
and
Right.
Adikesha with earth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we mapped the riverfront, as you can see, the city stretches behind the ghats, and
Mm-hmm.
within the 300-meter zone, the mapping shows actually that these five ghats are important because there is a convergence or a confluence of streams. And as we know in Hindu thinking, whenever two rivers merge, that becomes a very holy spot. So at Asi Ghat, there is Asi Nala and Ganga,
Mm-hmm.
and at Varana River and Ganga meet, and this is where the Adikeshav Ghat is. Now, these other three ghats, the streams have disappeared, but once upon a time, there were streams. So at Panchganga Ghat, for example, Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati um, um, are there symbolically, as well as Kirana and Dhutpapa, and they are no longer there actually, but they are represented symbolically in one kund and in sculptures. Similarly, at Dashashwamedh Ghat, uh, there is no river right now, but once upon a time, there used to be a stream called Gaudalia stream, which was probably named after River Godavari, and it drained the area from upper Varanasi, um, and uh, and so this convergence of Godalia and river Ganga is then again a very sacred space, and it becomes the Dashashwamedh Ghat.
Mm-hmm.
And Kedarghat, we've not been really able to find any convergence of streams, but I think, as we had discussed last time, there were many water bodies where the city is now. And so these water bodies were the most ancient sites of ashrams and worship. And the nalas that came from the water bodies, when they merged with the Ganga, these
Right.
became the sacred sites where myths found a home.
Right. Okay, so actually you just mentioned Assi Ghat, and I know that this ghat is very popular because it is one of the very few ghat that is linked with that city through the wide street. And if you happen to go to Banaras, you will find this ghat very easily. And part of this, this ghat is very close to Banaras Hindu University, so that makes people just drop in on this ghat and do ceremonies and pujas. But there, as we were discussing, Professor, that we have 88 ghats in Banaras. Now, can you please tell me about the temples on ghat, because people go and visit temples, do ceremonies. So what are those important temples? Are they associated with ghats?
Yes, there are many temples, and in our mapping of this 300-meter wide swath on the Ganga River front, we
Right.
found there were as many as 33 temples,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
actually an equal number of palaces
Mhm.
and havelis built by the rajas and noblemen from different parts of India. So the historic significance of the riverfront is very high because of the continuous building activity that has occurred. Yes, mostly this has happened since in the last 300 years, but it goes back at least to 700 to 800 years. There were attempts to build temples and some temples were raised, but today in 21st century, we find these temples built in a certain style. So at Ghat, as you said, it's a very popular hangout spot, and this
Right.
photograph was taken when the river was high.
Mm.
I want to draw attention to this tiny temple under
Mm.
the people tree,
Okay.
Kuntadeshwar Mahadev,
Okay.
and there are dozens of these small temples, edicule temples, which is basically, a sanctum and a small um, tower on that, on top of that. And there are hundreds of them, and they add a lot of vitality and interest because um, they are mostly devoted to Shiv as in his linga form, and people come, apply, put water, Ganga Jal. The bigger temples are designed in this Shikara style, and they mostly are this pyramidal tower with smaller shikhars, and so we have this effect of clustered effect. And in this Jagannath temple at Ghat, not very far from the people tree, we see the Panchayana mandal form. So we have the central tower, and then we have smaller four towers. By the way, this Jagannath temple is actually modeled after the Jagannath temple in Puri, in Orissa, and this is a temple devoted to Krishna and his brother Balram and Subhadra. And just as in Puri, the deities are taken out on the Rath Yatra. And as we start going northwards, we then come across the um, Kedarghat Temple, and this is again a temple which is built, by the Vijayanagar kings, and so you see a little bit of that of that touch here. Um, Interestingly, here inside the temple, the linga is kind of a rough outcrop,
Mhm.
and it's the mountainous form of Shiva. Shiva, as we know, is also known as Kedarnath. He lives in the mountains,
Mm.
and because this is on a somewhat higher part of the ridge running along the Ganga, we see many steps going down, and before the Ganga is reached, there is the Gauri Kund.
Mhm.
And then we go to the Ashwamedh Ghat as we keep on walking, and this is the most famous ghat because it is close to the chalk. It has got a number of temples, as you can see in this photograph. It's easy
Right.
to reach. This very popular Aarti ceremony is held here. Once again, in this stretch, you see a cluster of temples, and here Lord Brahma had performed the Dash Ashwamedh sacrifice.
Okay.
Meaning,
Mm.
Ashwamedh sacrifice, the sacrifice of
Right.
horses, and it was a very popular sacrifice done by the ancient kings. In
Right.
fact, the sacrifice was also done in historic time by the rulers in second century, Varashava Naga rulers in second century
Mm.
BC. And here you see this temple is called the Ashwamedh temple. And here in this photograph, in the morning, again, a high level of activity. In the evening, the aarti is held, and
Right.
many people watch it sitting close, as you may have also seen it.
Mm.
People sit on the boat and watch it. They sit on the steps. They watch it from balconies.
Right.
And so this becomes like a giant, amphitheater
Right.
for seeing the aarti. And who are they worshipping? They are worshipping Mother Ganga. So
Mm.
they're worshipping the phenomenal form of Ganga, Ganga in a liquid form as liquid Shakti,
Mm.
but they're also worshipping Ganga in the anthropomorphic form. This small shrine is located on the steps. As we go, as we move further up north, we see Samrajeshwara Temple built in 1843 for the Queen of Nepal, and this is a duplication of the Pashupatinath Temple.
Mhm.
It's a brick temple. It's got
Right.
timber roof with a sheet with copper and a lot of wooden detailing carvings. Then we come to Manikarnika Ghat.
Right.
Manikarnika Ghat was clad in stone, yes, by Bajirao Peshwa and then later by Queen Ahilyabai.
Mm,
And the 1864 photograph actually shows that the steps um, were the site of cremation. And
mm,
now in this photograph, actually, the steps are no longer seen. It's all a like big mound of ash.
mhm.
And here we have Tarkeshwar temple, where Shiva is worshipped as Tarkeshwar, the one
Right.
who whispers the Tarak
Mhm,
month. It's also
mm,
the Shiva Durga temple in 1850. Again, the Panchayatna style with the central tower and smaller towers in the
right.
four corners.
Mhm,
Vishnu is here because he had performed austerities. He
mm,
wanted Shiva to come, and he dug a kund, with his
right.
chakra.
Mm,
And so we have the Manikarnika kund and
right.
Vishnu's feet, which are worshipped at the Ghat.
Right.
There
Mm,
is this very interesting temple which kind of got submerged. It's an 18th century temple. It got submerged in the it got tilted, and it's still there, though it tilted at an odd angle. And
right.
when the water recede, one can actually enter the sanctum.
Mhm,
Panchkroshi temple is a little away from the Ghats. It's on the Gola Gali, and I wanted to draw attention to this temple because it's a three-dimensional mandal.
mm,
It has these niches all around on all sides of the temple where the gods who are guarding the Panchkroshi Yatra in their various shrines are represented. So here you see 108 shrines which are on the Panchkroshi mark are symbolically represented in the walls of this Panchkroshi temple, and they are in these niches. They range from Vinayak to Shivalingas um, to Bhairav. And other, guns and Ganeshas. So
mm,
by going around this temple, one actually, in a few minutes, can do the whole Panchkroshi Yatra, which
right.
takes about 6 days. And then
Mhm,
we come to Panchganga Ghat. This was a very famous Bindu Mahadev temple, which was demolished by Aurangzeb, and so we have um, the mosque there whose towers have fallen down. But
mm,
the Bindu Mahadev temple was rebuilt, and it's inside a building. It's not very far away from the Dharahara mosque. And
okay.
finally, the Adikeshav temple,
Mhm,
which is devoted to Vishnu, but then Shiva is also worshipped as Sangameshwar
mm,
in a linga shrine inside the temple complex.
right. So, there, when we are talking about Manikarnika Ghat, and there are many stories which are related to this particular ghat, and few of them you also mentioned, like Shiva and Vishnu stories. But one interesting story which I have read somewhere is that according to the ancient text, the owner of Manikarnika Ghat brought King Harishchandra as a slave and made him work on the Manikarnika Ghat, and it is also sometimes called Harishchandra Ghat. And then Hindu cremations take place at that time, and I think most of the people know about the story of Harishchandra and how he has sacrificed his whole king and became a pauper or a person who was working for the dead bodies clearance. So that is one thing which I read. So I thought I'll share with my audience. But at this point of time, I would like to ask you, Amita ji, what is the challenge in preserving this heritage of Ghat, and how can we met? Because this is a these ghats and Banaras city itself has a huge cultural and heritage value. So how can we really preserve this wonderful city?
Yes, you're right. It's a great heritage, and it is really a landscape heritage in the sense that the sites are the most sacred, on which temples were built continuously, time and again, and the rituals happen because of the sites. A small correction: Harishchandra Ghat and Manikarnika Ghat are separate ghats, actually,
Oh, I
even
see.
though even
Okay.
though Harishchandra was working in Manikarnika Ghat.
Okay.
And these are the two cremation ghats. And Harishchandra Ghat has an electric crematorium. Uh,
Okay.
Manikarnika Ghat, however, receives far more cremations. About 28,000 bodies are burnt every year.
Okay. Okay.
So now what has happened is that pilgrimages increase. The number of bodies, that have cremated are quite a lot, and this adds, to Ganga's pollution. For example, as we saw in Manikarnika Ghat, there is so much ash there that the steps have disappeared altogether.
Okay.
Plus, the pollutants, the wastewater, the grey water from the old city finds itself, into the Ganga.
Right.
So many pilgrims, as many as 100,000 devotees,
Right.
are on the ghats on
Mm.
Mahashivratri and at
Mm.
Kartik Purnima. So
Right.
imagine the amount of waste that is generated as a result of all of these activities, and
Right.
as also because of the residents of the
Mm.
old city and
Mm.
its lack of
Mm.
sanitary system.
Mm.
So you've asked a very important question. How do we preserve this heritage? We preserve this heritage if we can conserve the ghats,
Okay.
which means that this has to be a resilient landscape. First of all, that is, when the Ganga floods,
Mm.
it should be allowed to spread on the opposite bank also. So which means there should be no sand mining on the opposite bank. So then the Ganga can deposit some of the silt, and that way the force of the Ganga will not be on the ghats, which are about seven, as you know, they go back to 700 years,
Mm.
and they're kind of fragile.
Mm.
The second point is that the no more buildings should be erected on the ghats.
Mm.
Instead of having, you know, more and more buildings, I think, because the activities are changing from season to season and during the day also. So all the new infrastructure should be in the form of kinetic architecture. That is, that could be folded up and then can be reinstalled. Ghats face east, so they're always bathed in sunlight. There is plenty of sunshine on the ghats, and we should use the solar energy
Right.
for all the activities that happen. There's also a lot of cooking, plus, we can use solar energy for the lighting of the ghats at night time. And finally, waste should be seen as a resource. That means it can be recycled. The puja items can be recycled. There can be composting pits. There can be gardens, in the silt bed that would use the biodegradable waste as fertilizer.
Mm.
And the resource, using waste as a resource means that the community can also be engaged in this activity, and that way the pollution in Ganga would be lessened, the local point source pollution, and Ganga, we hope, will be once again pure as we want it to be.
Right. I hope your suggestions are being heard by decision maker who are still making city beautiful. And I think lately they are working on these thing, but I think that these are the very, very good suggestions. And I think people are, of course, not the decision maker, but people at large should understand the value of the city, the heritage, and we have to preserve it in for our children for a long years to go. So we need a good plan for preservation of Banaras Ghat and Banaras city. It was so wonderful to talk to you today and learn so much about conservation, about the temples, about the Ghat and their stories. So thank you very much, Professor Amita Sinha. We'll be meeting again with some other interesting topic. Till then, bye bye. Take care.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure, ma'am.